Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday Night Roundup here on Blood Bowl Live. The last Monday Night Roundup of the season. Here to do our end of season review. End of season review for season. Let's count back. 5, I think it was the first one we did with all three of us. So look at us, looping background. And we're all here to go through season 7. Obviously, I'm joined once again, and as always, by Mr. Scott Bryant. Scott, hello, sir. How are we doing?
Good evening, Chris. Yeah, okay. It's a classic Monday, whereby it's been one of those days where I think therapists everywhere will be reaching out for my number because they'll be calling me before I can call them. But hey,
Great Monday.
Welcome to employment. They said, get yourself an education, get on in life. Yeah. But apart from that, looking wonderful, feeling good. Yeah,
Good. Well, maybe this will be some level of Blood Bowl therapy for you for your Monday evening. Who knows? Joining us as well, obviously, Mr. Tom Hovell. Tom, hello there, sir. How are we doing?
Hello. Yeah, good. Thank you. All well in sunny Stowmarket, so it's not as bad as woeful Woodbridge by the sounds of things.
It's quite sunny here. Just not internally, I guess. I don't know.
Can I just say, just a hello chat, and nice to see that everybody else is working hard as well. So Mr. Scott Norman underneath the truck, hopefully he's working and hasn't had some sort of unfortunate accident. Thoughts and loves and prayers with you as well. Hello from Melton, working hard to keep the beer industry going. Fine speech from that man. And hello to Magic Dave, working hard from the BT. Look at this. We are just keeping this world of civilization going.
Our league is single-handedly keeping Suffolk running by the looks of it. Isn't that great? We're going to go through. We're going to go through each group. We're going to look at the group stages. We're going to take a look at the predictions that we made. Then we'll go through the 2 knockouts, the Conference and the Champions Cup. We'll have a little look at the honours, and then we'll see how we're feeling about about upcoming season 8 and how we're looking to approach that as well. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into the groups. And we start, Mr. Tom Hovell, with your very own group, Orchidas, and we are we Tom. I'm just gonna. We'll start with you. We'll let you describe this one. Did this group turn out? Firstly, were you excited when you saw the group? Were you optimistic? Did it kind of turn out how you expected? How does it feel for you?
No, it was a great group to be in. Though I'd only ever played Jane out of the 3 competitors before, so I didn't know anyone's skill levels, anything along those lines. It was a good kind of group to be in, to be honest. There was some challenging games in there. There were some fun games. There were some frustrating games. It had it all. But yeah, it was good.
Scott, I don't know sort of what your thoughts were going into looking at this group in particular. I think that I thought that Jack would be a bit of a force in this group, but I maybe didn't expect, especially sort of early on as the group started, him to look quite so kind of solid as he did. It was his first season. We know he comes from a kind of strong Blood Bowl pedigree. Did this group sort of unfold the way you thought it would?
It did. I thought Jack would be towards the top end, which he duly proved right. Evening, Jack, if you're in chat. I thought then, second place and for that next playoff position, or I thought Jack would get one of the top 2 places, and then the other one would definitely be between our own Mr. Hovell and Jane as well. I all thought it would go to that wire. Leanne, as we said on the celebration evening as well, fantastic in terms of enthusiasm and sportsmanship and entertaining. So, and her, love for Blood Bowl, we should all aspire to that level of, happiness and lack of cynicism, really.
It was, I think I maybe did see Leanne coming bottom of this group against 3 people with probably a lot more practice. But I know that she had an absolutely great time this season. I think that's the most important thing. It was very close
Quiet.
between Tom and Jane, which I think we also expected it to be a very tight sort of battle between those top 3. So, and in the end, it did look, I guess 7 points seems like a lot, but 12 to 19, third to first. 12 is a very high third place score. Normally, that's kind of wild card level scoring, isn't it? So I think we're kind of, that's a very strong performance for Jane. Tom, how did we do on our predictions for this one? Were we on the money?
Well, so you, Chris, you predicted myself and Jane going through, so you scored 1 point. Scott, you predicted Jane and Jack to go through, so you scored 1 point. I predicted myself and Jane, so I scored 1 point. And our Vikings and Dragons, Scott, who was the special guest predictor, predicted myself and Jane as well. So we all scored 1 point. No one got a full house.
Jack, the one exceeding our expectations there from this
That's
group,
the one,
clearly.
yeah.
No, a very entertaining group to kind of watch as this one went through, and some very tight results that could have gone one way or another and changed this. So, yeah, I mean, Tom, well done, and well done to Jack, Jane, and Leanne for making this an entertaining one to watch as well. We'll fly straight on. We're going to fly through these groups because we know that we've got a lot to go through, and we'll drop into Bloodwiser, where we had the Hudor Hellions, we had the Fetid Feet, the Big Critters, and the Inglorious Bastards. How to call this one? I mean, it was kind of like going into it. I think while we knew that Scott wasn't playing a team he particularly liked, I think we know that Scott is a good enough player that my guess is most of us did see him coming out of this group. The battle for second was, I think, going to be an interesting one. I guess the person who I think unfortunately probably isn't the surprise, and I would say with 9 points actually probably kind of did better than maybe anticipated, I would say would be the Big Critters with those gnomes. Scott, I don't know what your feelings were on that, but I did not expect the gnomes to really do a lot at all this season. 9 points in third place, while it's not qualification for the top bracket, is a good result for a stunty team that hasn't been a lot around for very long.
Agree, Chris. We've seen gnomes really struggle, particularly when we started season 7. They were new to the meta. People were starting to learn how to play them, especially if they weren't upskilled. So, no dodge. Maybe later on, some of the more experienced coaches, as we'll come on to see in the tournament, started to get a feel for them. We've talked about to have 2 trees or 1 tree. So it very much felt like that John was, maybe first season in as well, so maybe had elements to build on as well. No surprise with Coach Creedy's, the man, the myth, the legend. Really pleased to see Luke as one of our rookie coaches doing well, and Nick was as glorious as Nick ever is, and I mean that with the highest compliment I can. Again, as much as we said about pillars of the community and what we do and a good ethos and playing a Blood Bowl. Nick with no re-rolls and all the random mutations in the world brought a lot of entertainment and kudos to Blood Bowl this season.
Yeah, agreed on that. I think it was a very brave lineup for Nick to take with no. I mean, I played 2 of Nick's games, and playing.
So it's your fault then.
I got a draw out of one, and I did. I gave the Old World Alliance a run for their money, and scared them a little bit in the other game. But it was playing with no rerolls. There is something very freeing about it, but also very terrifying. I guess, Tom, when you kind of look at the 2 coaches, I don't think there was necessarily at the start of the season a lot within the 2 coaches. We know Luke improved a lot, but no rerolls is probably what hurt Nick over the course of the group. Yeah,
I think it's that nice level of playing for fun and playing the meta, isn't it? Really, on that side of things, it's a very brave man who goes into a match with no rerolls, and he clearly had some fun doing it on that side of things. It's interesting to see Nurgle in there because I still consider myself a relatively newbie again on the sport, and everyone says how hard and difficult and they are to play, and especially to win with because they're so slow. But it's great to see that they've got through with Luke's. And again, just to echo what Scott was saying, those gnomes were a bit of an unknown at the start of the season because they were brand new to the game itself.
Yeah, a entertaining group here. Some really brutal games in this one. But well done to Scott for quite sort of dominating this group. But Luke, a very good sort of rookie performance as well. How did we do on our predictions here then? Did we get very... my assumption is that I can't quite remember, but I assume we all thought Scott would make it out of here. But who did we kind of think would join him?
Well, you think that, but you didn't.
Oh, did I not?
Yeah, you thought
Great.
Luke and Nick were going to go through. You thought.
Did I?
So you got 1 point.
Oh, well.
Scott, you thought Scott and Luke could go through, so you got 2 points. I predicted Scott and John as a bit of a wild card with the gnomes, so I didn't get through, so I only got 1 point. And A and D, Scott, got Scott and Luke for 2 points.
Well, look at me with no faith in Mr. Phipps whatsoever.
Ye of little old world faith, eh?
Me of little old world skill, and putting that on other people, I think, is probably more accurate.
Sorry, Chris, but don't you have a legal obligation not to put any faith in Scott Phipps when he plays Blood Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I do my best to root for the opponent.
Except in certain,
but quite often the opponent is me, and then I lose. Like, my record against Scott is terrible. I'll wait for him to post 4-0 Snotlings in the chat so that I don't have to go on about it.
He forgives you in chat already.
He forgives me. Oh, thank you, Scott. We'll go on to the next group. We'll fly through, and we'll go to Chaos Cola. A tight group. Yeah, there it is. 4 snots. This is nil. Thanks for that, Scott. A tight group. Chaos Cola. Another good stunty performance we had here. We had a former champion not making it through. I think again, it 10 points between 4th and 1st, I think actually isn't a lot. When you really kind of look at it and think about it, I don't think 10 points is very much. And when you actually look at the breakdown of results here, 1st place got 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. 4th place got 2 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses. That's not a big difference in results. That's one result going a different way, swinging 1st to 4th and swapping the whole group around. So well done to all 4 of these coaches, to Jamie, to Justin, to Elliot, and to Graham, for what was comfortably the tightest group to watch this season. Scott, coming to you first. We've kind of had some staple stunty coaches in previous seasons. James with his ogres, Scott with his goblins. Justin coming in his first season with a stunty team, and really, gave all the stunty coaches something to worry about when it comes to the Stunty Cup. Put in a very good show.
Yeah, I don't know how Justin would react to being called staple. But in terms of his performance was really well. If you look at also the amount of injuries, he had 21 injuries, almost up there with Graham, and 24, for his toxin run as Skaven. Justin was always going to be dangerous. He is, a man of international pedigree. So therefore he knows his way around a Blood Bowl pitch, especially when maybe at times he was trying to over try, and he got very excited with his 1-turn touchdowns for throwing the good old halflings. Jamie, he's awesome, isn't he? He knows his stuff. He rolls those dwarves. But if you look at Elliot's performance, 4 wins, 2 draws, unbeaten in the pool stage, and still you cannot get through, which alludes back to the tightness of the competition and the closeness of the skill set within the coaches you mentioned, Chris. And again, just a shout out to Graham, because he's a fellow Skaven coach. And he might have lost 4. He might have had runners, but this league brought some memorable moments. Graham in the rain, and with Elliot couldn't see and able to score at one point. And then Elliot in terms of doing a ridiculous touchdown with a flesh golem, and even Jamie doing a 6-up interception with a dwarf rather, who leapt like a salmon, plucked out the air, and gave us all these memorable moments. Great league for this season.
Yeah, it was a really great one to watch. Tom, you've played Necro yourself, not in leagues, but I know you've played it a lot in tournaments. Elliot got off to what for Elliot was probably a bit of a slow start in the group. 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 draws. But had a very, very good run in the knockouts. Do you think that's more to do with the team? Do you think that there's an element of like they take some warming up to, because he switched to Necromantic Horror the day of the draw? I think very last minute he swapped over to this team.
They are an exceptionally expensive starting lineup, including the rerolls. Rerolls are really expensive for them as well. Plus, you've got that big judge of, do you go for lots of speed with werewolves, or do you go more kind of middle of the road and bring in some flesh golems as well? All of which are really, really pricey. Plus, also, a lot of the pieces can't kind of build up SPP very quickly, because you're really relying on werewolves and ghouls to score your touchdowns. So that's a bit of a situation. Like you both said, it's really a phenomenal kind of kind of group. That I when I saw that group, I was like, I'm so pleased I'm not in it, because there's so well experienced players in there and who know how to play regardless of the team. So there's some fantastic coaches. But yeah, just to see that someone who doesn't lose a single game, draws and wins, still doesn't go through, it just shows how close the competition was this year.
Yeah, so something that Thomas pointed out in the chat, the 6 latest games on the group covers the entire season. So Elliot got 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 draws in the group stage, but the wins we're seeing there are from his good knockout run. How did we do on predictions for this then? How did you get on?
Yeah. So you predicted Jamie and Elliot, so 1 point for yourself.
Okay.
Scott, you predicted Jamie and Graham. I predicted Jamie and Justin, so I get 2 points. And Scott Phipps predicted Jamie and Elliot, so 1 point. So I was the winner on that one with 2 points.
Jamie's dwarf team, I mean, it still looks incredible. It still looks like such a terrifying team. Like, it's currently here for the redraft, but look at this: guard, mighty blow, guard, mighty blow, guard, mighty blow, block, mighty blow, guard, mighty blow, multiple block brawler on the death roller. I mean, Jamie, and I know as well, Jamie will take dwarfs next season. He will start to get to the point where some of these players become quite expensive on the redraft, but it'll be really entertaining to see what he brings next season, sort of which players he keeps. I think it's a matter of time before we see him in a semi-final or further. I really do, because I think he knows what he's doing with this team. So, but well done to all of them. A very tight and entertaining group to watch. Moving on then to McMurtry's group. A very interesting one when the draw came out. One that I did feel for. I did feel for Dave and Simon and Tom in this group, because you've got 2 gnome teams and a brand new coach bringing Black Orcs up against one of the bashiest teams and coaches that we have seen in the ADBBL ever, pretty much sort of consistently winning some token or other at the end of the season for most casualties or similar. So a very, very daunting group for especially the gnomes here. And I think probably, Tom, I probably start with a little bit of kind of kudos to Dave, who brought a gnome team off the back of reaching the final with his lizards, and he having a very good show with it, and qualifying for the Champions Knockout with gnomes at the first attempt, which I think is, considering how much we know about gnomes, pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was one of those ones where you got two very bashy teams against two very squishy teams. So yeah, it was up against it with the gnome. So absolutely top marks for him to get through in second. Um, everyone has got a little bit of a psychological fear against those Righteous Rams, really, haven't they? I don't know if they're going to be redrafted again or whether this was their last season.
I believe they are.
What, being redrafted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it here first. So we've got to be worried about those again. And Nanny still is triumphant as she kind of storms around the pitch as well, just clearing up those gnomes.
Yeah, a tough draw for the two gnome coaches, but a pretty tight battle. Sir Honkington's Folly being sort of the fall guy in this group, but all the gnomes games here were very entertaining, especially the gnome on gnome games were very good to watch. So yes, Scott, a good showing from the gnomes here, and a very good showing for Simon in his first season as well.
I think a really, really good league, especially against the backdrop of, who are going to be known as the Gallagher brothers of the ADBBL, with the biggest comeback for Bob and Nanny and the Rams. That's something for everybody to have some sleepless nights over. I thought it was between the other three. It was closer down the points suggested. We mentioned Dave played some really good, but then Tom beat him. If you remember, there was one match when Sir Honkington's Folly beat the Dresden Defenders, and Dave only had 22 minutes of playtime. So that's how volatile it was as well in this league. And Simon did really well. 3 wins, great result, really doing well. First league, got his Orcs, and he's given himself a really good base in terms of Blood Bowl knowledge and some core skills. So he's got the opportunity to either build on something or take a brand new team.
I know
Good league.
some people are not overly keen on the bonus points, and when you look at this scenario here, both Dave and Simon got 3 wins and 3 losses, but it was the bonus points that got the gnomes the spot. 3 more bonus points than the Black Hawks got. How did we do on the predictions, Tom, on this one? I can't imagine that any of us didn't put Rich through, but I was wrong in the last group. But how did we do for second place?
No, we all put Rich through, but none of us got the second one. So, actually, no, I tell a lie. You got it. You got Rich and Dave. There you go. So you got it. Scott, you put Rich and Simon. I put Rich and Tom, and Scott Phipps did Rich and Tom as well. So, yep, you take that one, Chris.
If anyone's listened to the latest episode of the podcast, I'll take what I can get. We'll go straight on to the next group then. We'll go on to Nesquik, the group that we probably most refer to as the group of death when the group draw was done. Robert, James, and John, three very, very sort of experienced and scary coaches when it comes to the ADBBL. Very good performances historically from all 3 of them. And John, who brought the Old World Alliance, which, as an Old World coach myself, thought was very brave. John told me, Jack, sorry, brought Old World Alliance. John Reeder told me that sort of the difference between the first and second games that he played against Jack, he was sort of really getting to grips with things and remembering how to play because he hadn't played for a long time very quickly, and becoming a very good coach to play against. This group going to Robert, second, and James taking second, continuing his sort of impressive stunty run with this ogre team. Tom, were there any surprises to you in this group? I think it did probably surprise me that John didn't make it through, but we do know vampires can be so volatile.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I was about to say that John, we know his pedigree in playing Blood Bowl, and I think he's met his psychological match, which is himself and his dice when it plays against vampires. I don't know whether he's going to play them ever again or whether he's going to redraft them. But yeah, it was a very tight kind of group, especially between the two brothers at the top there. And I think if it hadn't rolled that many ones, John might have nipped in there.
I think it's tricky because we all know that if you really get beat, if you get a beating in your first couple of games, it's so difficult to recover when you've only got 6 in order to try and get through. John really did take a beating, lost some key vampires in those early games, and really did set him on the back foot going forward. So tricky for him, but well done to particularly James and Robert for putting such an experienced coach under so much pressure.
It was. Robert did an exceptional season. He got through the league on his defence. He only conceded the 1 touchdown, or very few, minimum in terms of casualties as well. And he has had this team now for a couple of seasons, so he's familiar with it. He knows its strength, and he really played to them as well. And when we come on to knockout, we know the sort of carnage he is capable of dishing out as well. Mr. James Hanley, evening all. He knows his way around the stunty board as well. And it really was pretty close. I think closer than maybe the stats say, between himself and John, as Tom alluded to as well. John was sort of almost beaten by his own dice. But I can understand why he's got that itch. So whether or not he'll be returning with vampires, who knows? So yeah, no surprise really. And shout out to the Golden Oldies. We've talked a lot about OWA this season, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So you were sort of bad, Chris, but that's all right. So I think it was the group of death called out. 3 very good coaches, and and the OWA coming back into a very tough league there. So great stuff, John. Yeah, nothing else to say.
How did we get on with our predictions here then?
Scores on the doors. Chris, 2 points. So got both of them right. Scott, 1 point. You predicted Robert and John. Myself, 1 point. I predicted John and James. And Scott Phipps, 1 point. He predicted John and Robert.
I'm surprised I got this right, because John and Robert, looking at the group beforehand, does seem like the obvious choice. But I guess James has really done something good with those ogres. Truly a stunty champion with that team. So well done to all involved. Another entertaining group of death. I'm sure John will be hoping for a slightly less daunting draw in the next season. We'll move on then to the next group, Achilea, and we've got Dead Star Belgrave, we've got the Flamingos, we've got the Buffalo Biggins, and we've got the Plague Brigade. And again, we've got another very, very tight top 3 here, and it was a very tight top 3. Harrison got off to a slow start at the beginning of the season, a slow, some not great results, but had a really strong return to the group stage. And something that I think is really interesting about how this group played out in the end, the Flamingos did all their games quite quickly, got all their games in, and then were kind of sat watching Harrison slowly build up this winning run and go into the very, very last game able to take that place. And sometimes I think we can write off, when you get a group a bit like this, where you've got Plague Brigade at the bottom, 1 win, 5 losses, almost looking like the fall guy, you can sort of write them off. But in the end, Tom, it was the Rats, it was Plague Brigade that decided the group, because a slightly unexpected win against Harrison in the last group game stopped him getting that champions team. So it really being the deciding factor in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Plague Brigade were off to an appalling start, where there's rats being slaughtered left, right, and centre. And you just reinforce about what you're saying, that if you get a bad start, it really does take a long time to try to get yourself back up and motivate and get going. But if you stick with it, you can be a deciding factor in it. And also, we're getting some kind of problems in chat here because you're not actually using the because Flamingos is clearly an acronym and you have not using the full name there, Chris. So what is the full name?
For the love of all that's mighty, I beg you, no, go with OWA next season. I think that's it. If the letters are all there within those words, I think I'm pretty sure that's what it stands for. That seems that feels right to me. I'm probably close. Who knows? Scott, Dave, a very dominating performance in this group to finish top. Were there any kind of surprises here? I mean, I don't think we're ever surprised to see the Flamingos holding their own in a very bashy group. Or goblins are not as agile as rats. They're not as bashy as shambling undead or the orcs, but they put in another great season.
I think they always put in a great game or a great season whenever they take the pitch. Yeah, nothing else really to add there. Dave, knows his shambling, the Dead Star, so well indeed. Harrison started a bit slow, as we said, could have got there at the end, right at the end. And Carlos made a great suggestion for you in chat, Kristen, if you've seen it, maybe an OWA league. It could be the Chris Co League. I don't know. But anyway, 1-4 chat to think about. So yeah, some good games in there, and I think Harrison. It'd be interesting actually if Harrison decides are the big uns coming back for season 8 or not. No Tomb Kings yet. Sorry, Harrison.
Yeah, I don't know whether I don't know. I don't know what I mean. I played Harrison in a friendly game where he went with vampires recently. So whether they're under consideration, I don't know. I'd like to see the big uns back again. I feel like I think he got into a rhythm and a run with the big uns this season. I think I'd like to see them return again. How did we do on our predictions here, guys? Gut says that I probably went for Dave, Rue, and Harrison.
Well, 3 out of 4 of us went for Dave and Harrison. That is yourself, Scott, and Chris, and also Scott Phipps. And I went for Harrison and Scott. So we all got 1 point.
Okay. I guess the two things to shout out before we go on to the next group here. Plague Brigade, shout out to Carl for being voted coach's coach of the season. The videos, the press announcements that were coming as the season went on were just were brilliant. I absolutely loved them. And he had such a good kind of like enthusiasm in every game. So very well deserved for that award. Yeah, again, this will be the last time we see the all goblin, all stunty flamingos. Yeah, we've all loved them over the last few seasons in whatever form they've been in. So yeah, we look forward to seeing what Scott brings next year. So right, let's move on then to Spike Mag. It's my group. Fantastic.
Yeah.
A group that I think actually again was other than myself very tight. And a number of results. There's a number of results that didn't need to go too differently with the odd dice roll, the odd decision, and this group could have been completely shuffled up in different ways, which I think is really great to see such a tight group here. Andy did put in some great performances. The most consistent, I think, out of all of us in this group, and deserved his place at the top there. And between JD and Phil, I think there wasn't too much in it with results going in different ways. I think probably whether different decisions that I had made would have made this group any different, I don't know. I think it was that I struggled more against the pace and agility that JD had than I did against the kind of strength and frenzy that Phil had. and maybe that was a bit of a factor here because JD managed to take a lot more points off me than Phil did. So that could maybe have been a bit of a deciding factor. But a great, from the three of them, from Phil, from Andy, from JD, a really, really entertaining group, some entertaining games and some very close matchups. I don't think at any point I could have told you which of those in their matchups against each other, which of those three were going to come out of any game as the win. I think either of them could have won, and it was and that's great to see it be so tight. Scott, did this group was this group as tight as you thought it would be, or did you expect it to go a different way?
I thought I agree with everything you've said, Chris. I think it was a lot tighter than 22, 17 and 11 points show respectively on the ladder there. There's several matches that the group at the start of the group seemed to be going one way. JD absolutely was on fire. He was stabbing everything to death. He was upskilling ridiculously quickly as well. And to score 13 touchdowns, in a group stage, it's it just shows what Dark Elves can do. Against that as well, Nurgle still to score 10. So I don't say they outscored you and Phil too much, but they did.
Well, they did.
But then Phil, we've all been there on other nights. Instead of having a loss, that could have been a win, and not just a 1 or 2-0. That could have been a significant win as well. So it was always going to be an interesting mix. And again, the table as it stands, and people just looking at this, it doesn't show the story and the evolution of that table. And I think that was the interesting thing. Each week we would talk. JD started really well. Andy would be keeping on in there. Phil then, would put, another win in the bag, and then suddenly put pressure on everybody else as well. And the Owlbears would just continue to entertain in terms of attempting the almost impossible, with the Owlbear touchdowns. And I think to play to the crowd, they will always have a place in people's hearts for whatever reason. People will remember them.
I'm right in saying that JD did the similar thing to Scott and played these games very quickly in quick succession, and then had to wait and watch the others play against each other. Is that right?
As a group, we did get through quite quickly, and I think it was JD sort of who was maybe having to wait on results a bit more. And the last two games in the group didn't go the way that Phil needed them to, and that gave JD the position. What would be your preference, Tom? Would you want to get your games done and know that you've done all you can and then watch other people, or would you rather see that every game is played and know what you have to do? Is that too much pressure? Where do you sit?
I don't think I'm skilled to do either of them, to be honest. My personal preference is that I like to stretch the games out because I enjoy playing the games, and just doing them all in one go very, very quickly, and then having to wait an age to play any more Blood Bowl would do my head in, I think. How about you, Scott?
That's a very interesting question, and I think having them all done, let's assume a regular season is 8 weeks. Having them all done in 3 weeks would feel a bit of so having one game a week felt good. Gave you something to aspire to towards the end of the week as well. So yeah, that was my preference. But if people wanted to play more, happy to accommodate.
How did we do on the predictions here? I don't think I thought I would get through. Am I right?
Quite right. Yeah. You predicted
a riot or something.
Exactly. So you predicted your brother and JD. Scott, you predicted JD and Andy, so you get 2 points. And I predicted. Did I predict? I predicted you, Chris, and JD.
Oh, you idiot!
Owner Scott predicted Chris and Andy.
Don't know what you were both thinking.
Can we just shout out to Andy though, and his amazing models and all of his videos, and channeling the spirit of Hugh Jackman, and everything that was to behold. Yeah, Andy, thank you about that. That just made the season.
Equally, if you haven't yet seen his gnomes painted, they look amazing. Fantastic paint job on them.
Oh yeah, no, they're very good models. The
Mm.
gnomes that he's got. Yeah. I thank you and well done to everyone in this group. I will never regret trying to hand off to an owlbear, and I'll happily have that as my defining moment of the season. So thank you, Carl. We will go to the last group then. It is Popcorn. It is our very own Scott Bryan, along with Tom Hunn, Sam Smith, and Simon Ballard with his humans, wood elves, lizards, Amazons. A very interesting group from the when it was initially drawn. I couldn't say that I could necessarily, Amazons are quite an agile team, but they're not the most agile. Saurus are a bashy but also agile team. Wood elves very agile. Humans, bit of a jack of all trades. I wouldn't have said going into this group that any kind of the teams of the rosters necessarily, other than maybe the redrafted lizards, had an obvious kind of advantage. Scott, how did it feel being in this group? What are your thoughts?
It was a challenging group. I'm not going to lie, especially with Tom, myself, and Simon. We'd been in the same group for season 6, so it was very much a deja vu. We all had new teams as well. And Sam, we know he'd been skilling up his double yolks for a while. It was a challenge. Some god awful dice from yours truly. It just showed the mix because the fact it went down to the last game on the last day to get the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th places. It really did. Tom was just an absolute animal. He really made the most of those Amazons. He turned them into a force to be reckoned with. And when anybody made a mistake, as we've said so many times on this podcast, Tom just exploited it, did well. He's the super coach, the prince of the Amazons. And it put him in such a good position in terms of skills, in terms of, cash and everything as well. And they're not that expensive. If you compare them to something like Wood Elves, I know I was running at least one journeyman most matches as well. Tom didn't have that. He had a really good balance as well. Simon had some awful luck with boneheading on his ogre, and Sam was either on fire or Again, if we look at it at one point in terms of the rounds, he got through, and on that last day on that double header that Simon played, we were talking in Discord saying, "Oh, what if Simon beat Sam 3-0?" And guess what? He did. Sam used all his rerolls by turn 2, and it was an uphill game at them, and 3-0. And then obviously the Wood Elves had to win. Got the 3-1 win. Was one final rush, so one final blitz, possibly with a tree and a risk to take possibly a 4-1, but it could have gone lots of ways, and it was good. But personally, I always knew that was going to be a 2-season team for Wood Elves. They're ridiculously expensive, and even looking at the redraft, they're going to be even worse in terms of that. But we'll talk about that when we start singing about season 8.
It was an incredible final kind of day and final push. It's sort of when you have someone in the group who runs away with it, like Tom did, and I say run away with it, but not the games that he played weren't all walkovers. Had some very challenging, very tough games. Sam gave him a very close run in that first game. I think it was 3-2 to the Amazons.
Yeah,
gave him a very, so he did have to work for that 6 wins at 6. But when you have someone who runs away, and then 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place are all trading blows and taking points away from each other, it creates such an amazing kind of dynamic and interesting group to watch. And this was really, really entertaining to watch going into that last game. So well done to you, Scott, and well done to Sam and Simon for kind of keeping it entertaining. Like, it may not have been, we're not looking at sort of 15, 16, 17 points, but it was you were all trading blows with each other and taking points away from each other. It was incredibly tight and very good to watch. Tom, did this kind of we know that Tom Huns, you've played Tom Huns, I think possibly before. You played him later in the season. How did you think that he would run away with it quite in the way that he did? How did you see this going?
Yeah, I didn't expect him to run away with it in this kind of situation where literally he won every game. And as you say, it wasn't a clear runaway. That came later in the playoffs. But no, clearly he knows those Amazons well and plays them well. And it was a very difficult kind of group to predict. Although, Scott's lack of faith in himself has scored him 2 points in the prediction.
Yeah, how did we do on the predictions here?
So both you and Scott predicted both Tom and Sam to go through. And then both myself and Scott Phipps predicted Scott and Sam to go through. So you both got 2 points, and we got 1 point each. So the final scores on who predicted right.
Here we go.
Okay. So in joint third place is myself and Scott Phipps with 8 points. In second place, between second and first, there is 1 point between them. Okay.
I think Chris has got it.
And it is the fact that Scott, you got 10 points, and Chris, you got 11. So Chris, you predicted the most.
I mean,
crumbs of comfort.
Would you rather have predicted correctly or gone?
Let's not talk about then the last week's New Dice, please, quiz. Or we could talk about that, or you could talk about the weekend and 4-0, I believe it was. Yeah. Anyway,
why is it when I win something, I have to be reminded of my failures? What's going on, guys?
We know what happens if you get
check.
Exactly.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Like a fine racehorse, Chris. You can't, like a thoroughbred.
Well, that's all the group stages. That's all of the groups. We know all of our playoff entries. Let's go to the Conference Cup first then and see how these rounds kind of got on. We'll take it round by round. We won't necessarily go game by game here. We'll go round by round. So looking at the first round of the conference, the last 16, Tom, were there any games that particularly kind of stood out to you as games that you thought were maybe going to be really key ones, and games that surprised you?
In the Conference Cup?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would probably say the ones that I was wanting to see and I saw was Scott's versus Jane, because I thought that was going to be a close one.
Scott v. Leanne.
Yeah.
What?
No.
Simon versus Jane.
No, Scott. What? No. Scott versus Jane.
We are professionals here, viewers. Stay around.
Yeah.
That's the quarterfinals. We're looking at the last 16.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I'm looking at the wrong screen myself. Yeah. No worries. So
it's only episode 18. It's fine.
Only episode 18, exactly. I was actually quite surprised in regards to the Vampires versus the Gnomes, but that there was only 1-0. I think the interesting thing I kept finding about the Vampires is that people tend to forget they've got hypno gaze. And I think that can be very strong.
Oh,
yeah. Vampires only won by 1-0. That's an interesting one.
I hate to disappoint you, Tom. That game was rolled off.
Was it?
Yeah.
Move on. It's been a long day.
Scott, was there a game that you thought was going to be tight? Was there a game that the result surprised you?
There were a couple I really enjoyed. My two standout matches from this one were Elliot versus Carl. And apologies, Elliot, it was in this one where you did the wolf dodge, the wolf in pickup, the wolf dodge out, and a throw to the flesh golem who scored. And even Carl was applauding that. It's on stream on the YouTube. Anybody wants to go back and watch it. That was a thing of beauty and really sets up great match. Two good coaches there. And the other one, which I really like, I have to say, Chris, just because it was your slightly nemesis, but you and John and the Big Critters. I just thought the way that you took the early start, then you got pegged back, and then you just about, you rescued victory from the jaws of it. Yeah, and then it went to the roll-off. Yeah, and I thought
it was, do you know what? It was absolute credit to John, because it was probably my favorite game of the season, because John just kind of everything that I had that I could throw at him, he just threw back at me in the form of stunty nonsense. And going into extra time, I had such a player advantage that I thought, this will be an easy 3-2. And then with just 2 trees and 1 gnome left, he manages to get the ball, dodge out, throw teammate, double rush to go down and take the lead in extra time. And he then had there's then nothing he could have done about it. There's nothing he could have then done after that point, because he only had 2 trees that were stuck on the line and a single gnome, and I had a movement 8 catcher who was just going to kind of run and get the equalizer. But it was an absolutely incredible game, and it was so much fun, and it was I threw everything I had at him, and he threw literally everything he had back at me, and it was it was unfortunate that it had to go to a roll-off, but it was absolutely incredible. So thank you, John, for that game. It was really entertaining. So we had our people who went through in that game. I guess my standouts in that game were, it is probably my v John was an unexpected result. And Scott, I have to give you some credit, because I know that I do feel bad for Leanne in a way, because she was very new. She has taken a bit of a beating this season. But whether you're playing someone who's very new or whether you're playing someone who's played forever, scoring 5 touchdowns in a game of Blood Bowl is not an easy thing to do. So it was still a very impressive result regardless. Thanks. So well done for that. Looking at the quarterfinals, then, Tom, I assume that Jane versus Scott was one of your picks in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, that was a really interesting one, because, like I said, Jane I've played, and she plays those necromantic horrors very well. She's played them, I think, in tournaments as well, so she knows them. And I think by that time also, as Scott said many times before, this is a 2-season team, these Wood Elves. But you were definitely getting the hang of tactics and how to use them. At which point did your tree man come into play? Was it by this time, or was it coming later?
I think he came in for the last. I think he came in for the last league match against Simon. I know he's definitely on the pitch against Leanne. But yeah, I think this was one of my first games where I didn't have this was the first game I had where I didn't have a journeyman.
Oh, yeah.
This was the first game I didn't have a journeyman, and as you said, it could have gone either way. Jane played really, really well. It was 1-0 to the Shamblin classic Wood Elf turn 7 2-turn touchdown, if I remember, to get it 1-1. I think Jane failed a pickup, exploited it, took the ball, scored 2-1. And then Jane had a chance to equalise on her turn 14, I think it was. And she had one of those moments we all have as coaches. She forgot she'd already done the blitz. So Wood Elves went in and do what Wood Elves do. You don't have the ball, I'll go in, pick up, dodge out, and I'll run for the hills. So yes.
Oh, yeah. What
Was
was
there
your
another
strong-
game? Yeah, was there another game from the two of you? Any other games in this round that stood out? Sadly, the Corn versus OWA was not played, so I conceded that game to Phil. But of the other two fixtures, some interesting tight games by the looks of it.
I thought they were both good. I thought John really found his groove with the vampires and the dice. Seemed to, as Tom alluded to, his psychological nemesis. Simon did really, really well in terms of his orgs to get it. It was okay. It was 3-1. Then Simon scored that last turn touchdown for 3-2. But it was a really, really good match. So again, that match and then the battle of the cousins. Elliot versus Harrison. So it was very good indeed. It was, it was a good match. So, yeah.
So,
Just good.
Looking at the semi-finals, then, Tom, I tell you what, I'll talk to you about Elliot versus Phil, and then we will let Scott tell us the story of Scott versus John. But this game very close here, went to a roll off in the end, went all the way through to for 24 turns, and I think we have to give a bit of a shout out and credit to Phil. By this point in the season, Elliot has kind of got the ball rolling, got some good skills, really built something into this necromantic horror team, and it was, and we know the caliber of coach that Elliot is. So to take it all the way to 24 turns, a very impressive run.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said before, these necromantic horrors, they are very difficult to get skilled up and get going. But by this time, Elliot had got them up to that level. And there were a number of big threats on his side, especially with one of his flesh golems, and also with block and guard on that flesh column. But then also Cecilia, with the werewolf, with obviously claws, frenzy, and regeneration, but also block, tackle, and dodge. So coming up against that, that's pretty nightmarish. But as you say, it was a very hotly contested game, and it was just a shame. I think we mentioned this in a couple of things. It's just such a little bit of a bit sad that it has to come to a roll off to actually determine who the winner was. But hats off to both teams.
Yeah, I think there's no shame in losing on a roll off. It can be very
No.
difficult to take, but there's no shame in it because you've clearly earned your time to get there. But Elliot was on a very good run by this point. Phil did very well to run him to that to the very last point that he could. Scott, I'll be completely honest with you. I didn't expect you to beat John, and I'm very sorry. And I underestimated you. And it was a very good. It was a very well put together performance. Tell us about it.
Thanks, Chris. I'll take that moment of humility from you, and I'll frame it, and I'll hold it. I'll hold it close. It was a good match. This was probably my best match of the season. John was, really playing well with the vampires. He scored, he scored the first vampire, and then even to try and get back to a 2-turn touchdown because John knows what else can do. So he played them really well, and it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Evening, Stephen. So it was a really good match, and then I took the opportunities and played it very well. Stuck to the game plan. Tried not as tempting as to go for some YOLOs. Were stuck to the game plan, focused on the thralls, took the opportunity when it came to it, and it was very good. And playing John Reader is like it's a thing of emotional beauty. That's all I'll say on that.
I make no secret of the fact that I think John is one of our best coaches in the league, and he's in the chat and he's just said, "Well played to Scott in our game. No dodgy dice. None of the vampires got sent off on kickoff. Just the better player won." So
what a nice
well done.
What a gentleman.
The check is in the post.
And that leads you to a final showdown against Elliot, which was a a very close game. And there was, I think it was, I know that it ended like I was in the shop. I was playing a friendly against Harrison when it was playing, and didn't seem like there were many elves left when it came to the very end. But I didn't feel. We know that Elliot is always very calm, even when things aren't going his way. But you certainly did not make it a comfortable win for him.
It was no, it was a challenging match. I mean, straight from the get-go, tried to put pressure on with the War Dancer, who's obviously got block, dodge, tackle, plus with the tree as well, and didn't get the dice. But then Elliot started positioning, pushing, so he put me in a position where I had to roll dice to achieve basics. If I wanted to position players, I had to roll dice, and we know in Blood Bowl, if you have to roll dice when you don't need to, it's going to come you a cropper. And there were chances, I had a chance to score, but Nuffle's tripwire took me down. I had a player about hopefully to go into the end. At one point, I think we had a war in Elliot's end zone. We had a War Dancer, a catcher, we had a werewolf, we had the ghoul in there as well, and a couple of zombies. And there was surfing galore, and the ball got thrown back in. Couldn't get a pickup for a last minute tournament, and the grind just came in, particularly from Elliot. He was just grinding the team down, and even with Wood Elves, when you're down, and with any sort of Elven team, when you're down to sort of 7 or 8 players, you still think you've got a chance because you know what you can do. You've got to roll some good dice, but you know what you can do. And despite taking out one of his ghoul runners as well, he cleared me off the pitch, and he did it with style and finesse, so kudos to you. And it was summed up whereby on his last end of it, I wouldn't say he made me weep when he took off and a casualty the Bob Bakewell, the War Dancer, but it was pretty close to it. And then to sum it all, he did a block. Sorry, he was a blitz on the tree. Yes, he had claws, but he still managed to roll 12 and still KO the tree. And that sort of summed it up. So I almost had I think I had one left on the pitch.
And he's also got a cheeky elf zombie lineman now as well, care of you.
Yeah, he got his full souvenir bag at the gift shop as well on his way out, Tom. He really did. So, yes. Well done, Elliot.
Well done.
Yeah, I think we're now in this realm. We're looking at doing the same next season, where even if you don't make it out of the group, in one of the top positions, you still go into a playoff. And I think it is worth emphasizing that knockout Blood Bowl is very different to tournament or group Blood Bowl. There is a lot more on the line. You do have to, especially when you're thinking of redrafts or thinking of anything else, you do have to maybe go for it a bit more. You do have to risk things sometimes a bit more. And I think regardless of whether you are in the Champions playoff or whether you're in the conference playoff or next season, whatever playoff you end up to, if you end up in a playoff final, then you have played incredibly well to get there. And well done to Elliot for getting two finals and 2 final wins in a row. Scott, well done for this being your best playoff run, I think.
Yep.
It's so far, and it's an achievement. Whether it's the Champions or the conference, it's absolutely an achievement to get to a playoff final, because it is not an easy thing to do. Tom, before we go on to the Champions playoff, then a little word on the 3rd place playoff. John and Phil battled it out for a 1-1 draw and agreed that rather than going to a roll-off or anything like that they would share the 3rd place trophy. Khorne versus Vampires is an interesting trade-off. The casualties look like they went the way of the Vampires in this game. I think actually the 3rd places we didn't cover in another roundup because they hadn't been done yet. So it's sort of an interesting battle sort of for each coach here. And I think you've got to say both coaches maybe not having the season that they wanted, put up a good fight against each other in the last game.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit of even matched, kind of, injuries on both sides, casualties being caused, 1-1. It seems pretty nice and straightforward, really. The first half looked pretty quiet. Injuries on turn 1 for both parties, and then touchdown in turn 8, and then very similar the following kind of end. So yeah, as you say, so maybe it was the final game for both of these teams. I don't know whether either of these teams are going to be redrafted or not, but well done to them for getting as far as they did.
I believe it's a solid maybe from both coaches. I've not heard commitment from either. I know Phil is tempted to bring Corn. I feel like maybe there's some unfinished business with John with the Vampires, but I don't know because I know he's really enjoying Skaven at the minute in tournaments. So I don't know. I don't know which way both coaches will go next season. But well done to both of them. Again, you get to the third, fourth place playoff. You're going to play the maximum number of games that you can in a season, and a good show of kind of sportsmanship as well, that they both would rather have shared third place than go to a roll off. So I think that's really nice to see as well. Okay, we're going to go to the Champions Trophy now. Before we do, I'm going to pick up this rather grumpy dog. Come on, mate, because he clearly wants to be involved, but only when it comes to the champions, because he's a glory hunter. So here he is, and we will dive in. So, Scott, over to you first then. Last 16, Champions Trophy. Was there a game that immediately as the draw was taken stood out to you? And was there a game which maybe the result surprised you?
I think there were lots of games that really jumped out. The one we were looking at was the Rams versus OTFC, so Rich versus James, two coaches who have gone head to head before. And I know, unfortunately, this didn't maybe quite get because there was a break in play with, as we all know, sometimes life gets in the way. There was a break in play. So we didn't quite see the last hurrah of the nanny. But the other games that, you draw the attention to, Luke against Andy, Nurgle on Nurgle, it was looking at one stage just like a big scrum in the middle of the pitch when I was there when they were playing this. But it was a good match for both of them as well. And, Mr. Coach Crades, as much as he was despised in the OWA, he can play a team he despises very well indeed. So who knows what he's going to be like, in what vein of form. Maybe the Bleeding Clowns or the Chaos Dwarfs after that season 9, this could be his championship bid. But that was another really good match. Dave against Justin, a great match. Our own Mr. Hovel, I know he came up against the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Huns. That was always a difficult one. And then Jack and Sam, again, that was really good. And I think the 5-up dodge out, and the 5-up, sorry, it was the 5-up dodge with the Saurus, with, to get to force that result at the end when Jack had absolutely decimated Sam's team. That was another Blood Bowl moment.
I think for me in this last 16, the game that I was kind of the two games I think that I was most intrigued by were certainly the Riotous Rams versus OTFC, and then Dead Star Belgrave versus T-Belly Trudgers. They were both pretty close games, and I think I don't know actually whether Rich would. I think James was doing very well in that game. Whether I think it could have maybe gone to extra time or even a roll off if they had managed to play the full thing. And Justin putting up a fight against a very punchy Dead Star Belgrave. For me, the match of the round was probably the Double Yolks versus the Argartha Muirs. I think looking at how the groups went, I don't think you would have expected Sam. Sam put up a really, really good fight in all of his games in the group stage. And Sam, I know that Sam has got there's the potential within Sam when things go, well, tactically he's got a lot there, and sometimes he gets a bit unfortunate luck. Before the season even started, he played a friendly, or this might have, it was a long time ago. He played a friendly and beat Acredes 3-0 in a friendly preseason with this Lizard team. So I think it was. I was so pleased with that result because I think it was sort of Sam's potential coming out. Maybe there was a bit of bad luck. Maybe there was some good luck on the other side. but that was maybe the surprise for me in the round, but a pleasant one. I was glad to see Sam go through in what's his third season. Tom, what was your kind of pick of the group? I mean, you can't have been overly happy when the draw was done, having seen how the groups went out.
No, absolutely not. No, I learned very quickly in that game that it's not all about making nice symmetrical pieces on the kickoff for your team. You actually have to plan them, because if you don't, you definitely get schooled on that. But it was good to play, but it was a hard lesson. It was interesting to learn a lot of tactics that Tom knows so well on that side of things. I was just pleased to get that far anyway in the whole season. But just to kind of build up on your point, that one with Jack and Sam, yeah, was definitely one of my ones I wanted to watch, because I knew how kind of destructive Jack was with his game and how well he plays those Norse. He's a little bit like James with his dwarves. Jamie with his dwarves. I think he's only ever played Norse, so he doesn't really want to play another team and all that kind of stuff. So he really wants to focus on them. So it was great to see Sam very quickly getting a touchdown in turn 4 on that one. And the final one for me was that little bit of an upset. I did think the Ramos Rams were going to go through, but OTFC pipped them at the post.
So last 16, a few surprises in there. Looking at the last the quarterfinals, Scott, it feels like any surprises that we got were very quickly squashed into maybe what we would have expected a bit more as soon as we got then to the last 8 in this round. Amazons absolutely unbeaten, storming their way through. Robert putting in another fantastic performance, again unbeaten going into that game. Dave with a great result, and the Old World Alliance, putting in a good show against Luke as well. Lots of sort of previous group matchups too. Were there any results that surprised you in the quarterfinals?
It was very much a return to form, if we have to think about it as a theme. The algorithm was slightly disappointed the way Tour Play staged it, so that your top 1 and top 2 split in the group from the octofinals naturally came into the quarterfinals. So yeah, returned form. Tom was playing really well. I know he gave Sam the advantage when they played their match, and Tom did what Tom did. Sam didn't make a pickup. He didn't even put players around to case. Sam was really in a YOLO mood at that point. And Tom took advantage when the dice failed Sam. He went in, he won a pickup, scored 2 quick touchdowns. Sam brought it back, and then Tom ran away with it. And a similar, if we look at Robert, he got to the quarterfinals built on his defense, and that really did him, justice again. Playing some very, very solid, very good Blood Bowl as well. Dave, we know, controlled the match really well against Jamie. And then, Mr. Phipps did what only Mr. Phipps can do with your favourite team, the OWA.
Tom, what did you think of this round?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. It's the first time that a dwarf team hasn't got through to the semis. So it was a shame that I thought the World's Edge Berserkers was going to get through, but clearly Dave and his Dead Star Belgravia, Chamelin did pit them at that particular post. It was interesting to see Old World Alliance getting through quite convincingly by the listings of a 2-0. Which is a bit of a surprise, but it starts to show. You start to see the real the real professionals in this game, where they're getting really quite close on their matches.
You do look at the coaches that then made it through to the last 4. Tom, Robert, Dave, and Scott. There is some pedigree and some experience in those coaches. It's it's a very good group. It's kind of getting to the Champions League and seeing Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, sort of Juventus and Man City, and going, yeah, okay, yeah, no, that looks right. This makes sense. Tom, unfortunately, Dead Star Belgrade versus Pseudo Hellions had to go to a roll-off, which went the way of the Old World Alliance. So we'll just focus on the Amazons versus the Shambling Undead. A game that, looking at the casualties and the score, was probably as close as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. There seemed to be a lot of casualties and a lot of actual injuries as well. So it was quite a high injury statted game on both sides by the looks of things. In particular, with a number of -1 armor values on the Amazons, which you would think, oh, is that going to have an impact on the final if they go if and when they go through? But it was a tough game by the looks of things. And it also went into extra time as well. So at the right to turn 24, in fact, on that side of things. I don't believe it was a roll off, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was a win on the pitch for the Amazons. Scott, that was a very difficult one to call. That Amazons versus Shambling Undead. Did you think? I think that on another day that game does go to Robert. We know how good Robert can be. Did you obviously played against Tom in the group stage? Did you see anyone stopping him by this point? He gets to this game with 8 wins out of 8. Did you see anyone stopping him?
No. Tumbleweed. No, I didn't. And I put it all down to myself personally for giving him the inspiration by allowing him a 4-0 win in the group stage. So, giving him the confidence to build on that team and go forth. Tom has really, really played them well in terms of the positioning, in terms of the, he plays edge as they should be played as well. So, yeah, we all said at the time it was going to be a close match, and it really, really was a close match. Robert had opportunities to come back towards the end as well. So, it was literally turn 24. It was extra time. We know it was going to be close. So it wasn't the runaway, but you just thought the way that Tom was playing, he was in the zone, and it was a bit of the unstoppable force by the time we got to that point. And if you go then on to the final, that momentum carried all the way through.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because you look at it and you look at the kind of difference in the runs that both these coaches had, and if you're saying who deserves to lift the trophy at the end of the day, 9 wins from 9 going into the final game, and it seemed like Scott, you were on the table next door. I was 2 tables across playing a friendly game. It felt like Tom was in control and took the win. Sort of the amount of times that I just heard him casually say, "That's a knockout, that's a casualty," after doing a block. It felt like he didn't seem stressed. He didn't seem worried. It felt like he had the game under control.
That's exactly what it was, Chris. The fact that he was 1-0 up. He'd obviously taken out everybody's favourite halfling hopeful this year as well by, half time. So he was doing very well. Yeah, he had a line woman dead as well. But, what's that with all the players he had on there as well? So despite, Scott doing his best to kill as many as he could, and he did get 2, which is always a good thing. The fact that the match was done in 1 hour 43 and Tom only had 32 minutes of game time says it all for you, really.
Scott is in the chat saying Tree failed turn 1 and I never recovered. Tom's a great coach and played brilliantly. Tom, it was very for Tom, it was very impressive to get to this game 9 wins from 9. I guess we've got to say that for Scott, it was very impressive to get to this stage with a team that he just was not enjoying playing. That kind of shows, as a coach, like a level of versatility.
Absolutely. And I look forward to hearing him win the Death on the Demon 2 with the elves, then, if he hates them as equally as much as the Old World Alliance. So yeah, it's one of those kind of interesting games, as we've all said. Tom's team just went from strength to strength the entire season. Nothing could stop them on their way, whereas kind of everyone was kind of writing off Old World Alliance, but
that might have been my fault.
Yeah. But they kept on going. They kept on getting in there, and just unfortunately, even though, as you quite rightly say, they killed 2 people dead. 2 line women dead, which could, to other coaches, would be like, oh no, I've now I've got the minority numbers on the pitch kind of thing. Didn't phase Tom at all. Well done, congratulations.
A little shout out to the third place game. Both coaches, it would have been a mirror match of Shambling Undead versus Shambling Undead. Coaches decided to share the prize. So well done to Dave and well done to Robert. Like I said, it's always, third place game is a really tricky one to play in, but being in the third place game shows how well you've come, especially in the Champions playoffs. So a huge congratulations to both of those to share that title. Well, let's have a little look at the honours board then, and then I'll have one final kind of question for the 2 of you before we will call it a day. So the most valued team is not one that's going to show up because we've done the redraft, and so all the team values get reset to 0. But that did go to the Old World Alliance team. Elliot and the so I'm Not Boring and Illustrious Legends, both up there with most famed. Rich's team having been redrafted as Righteous Rams so often, still up there as the most experienced team in the league, very impressively. Old World Alliance being the most versatile, very, very tight actually for most versatile. And Goblins in there on fouls alone, I think, being quite impressive as well. Many touchdowns being scored here. Scott, well done on being top 3 for most touchdowns. Very impressive place to be.
Especially after the slow start, so I'll take that every day of the week.
Best defense, we see similar names on this board for best defense in the likes of Robert and Scott and Rich. Scott normally takes best defense, so well done to Robert for nabbing that one. Casualties,
shout out to Jack there as well, just in terms of best defense, for a rookie coach to only concede 4 touchdowns. And of course, he got through to the championship in his first season. So we did say earlier he is from a fine pedigree of Blood Bowl stock. So yeah, he did himself and the family proud.
Most killer goes to the Old World Alliance. I think some of those deaths may have come against the big critters because there were some very brutal matches between those 2 in the group stage. Rich it's very impressive to still get the most casualties and go out in the last 16. So well done, Rich. A very impressive record there. Dirty player and sent off. No surprises that the Goblins take that yet again. What we've come to expect from them. Most completions, well done to Simon for getting 12 completions and taking home most completions this season. Tom did very well on the completions there. So to go out when Simon did in the group stage, in the last in the knockouts, and still claim that most completions is very impressive. JD was on a bit of a run with the completions. I think 1 or 2, I think even 1 more game for JD, and he may have taken that. Interceptions, the usual 3-way tie, and well done to James for not only winning but retaining the Stunty Cup. A very impressive feat indeed to retain the Stunty Cup. My question for the 2 of you then, before we finish our last little bit of media that we'll do for season 7, is what is your kind of headline give me your headline story from the season. Give me your kind of your thing that either happened this season, a team story, a game, sort of the thing that you would put on the billboard to get people to sign up for season 8. What would be your moment? Scott, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
I think for me it would be anyone can win. We have a new champion. We have a conference champion who started, badly. We've seen coaches, turnover coaches we'd expect to win as well. We've seen lots of new teams coming through in terms of coaches with teams as well. We've seen an incredible community, with everything that's been going on. We've raised almost £1,000 for Macmillan Cancer Relief. We've, despite everything going on, and our hats and our love and our memory go out, to Daryl as well and his family, to everything that goes on, the fact that we've had to play. And it has been against, in the summer holidays when, unfortunately, people are away, family commitments, etc., all why that would ever come before a game of Blood Bowl, who knows. So it's been really good, and I'd say to all coaches out there, it's great to see. We've got a good platform. We need to build on it. We need to keep it strong. We need to try new things, and shout out again to the one, the only, the man who's made this possible for all his investment. So go and spend some money down at A&D, everybody.
Tom, what would be your headline?
Yeah, I'd say probably the diversity of teams. It's so much fun just to go. You're not in a in a group stage with 3 other dwarf teams or 3 other elf teams. It was the fact that you got to play a wide variety of different teams, agility, bashy teams, that kind of thing, and the camaraderie amongst everyone. So thank you so much for making it a really, really special kind of season on that level. The fact that it didn't matter whether you won, lost, or draw. Everyone shook hands. Everyone had a fun time. And I can't think of anyone who didn't have a little special moment on one of their games where they thought, well, just roll the dice and see where it goes, and just something little magic happens. So that was a fantastic season. To thank you, everyone.
I think it's very tricky to pick a single moment. Having a new champion is fantastic. It is really great. It does show that anybody can have the season of their life and take home that top trophy. And Tom, I think you're right. I think probably everybody can look at one moment in one game that they had throughout the whole season as just something that was a little bit spectacular and a little bit special. And I think that's really great. And yeah, I think that's probably a nice sentiment to end on. Thank you very much to Scott, and thank you very much to Tom for your continued turning up here on a Monday to ramble with me for this roundup. Thank you to everyone who has appeared on the roundup as the season has gone on. Thank you to Mr. Scott Phipps and to Aardvarks and Dragons for being the creator and host and pillar of this league. And lastly, thank you to everybody who has watched us, everybody who's streamed us, everybody who has watched us afterwards, everyone who has taken part this season and made it so fantastic. So on that note, thank you everyone for a fantastic season 7, and we will see you all in season 8.